on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Let's get going on this Monday. Happy March. We're in it. Thank you to Andrew Langer for filling in on Friday there. Had to take a quick day off to see the kid graduate from nuclear power school, because you think Larry O'Connor's children and you immediately think nuclear genius. I don't know what happened there, but she's 6 months away from figuring out what boat she's on. I'm still getting used to calling submarines boats. Subs are boats. They're not ship. No, they are.
Oh,
They're
really?
boats. Don't call it a ship.
Ah.
Yeah. They're boats. I think the distinction is a ship has boats attached to it, connected to it, right? Either dinghies or lifeboats. And
yeah.
That's not it. I don't know what it is. Anyway, submarines are boats, and I'm proud, and that's the end of that conversation. Coming up at 6:05, Ethan Peck, National Center for Public Policy Research, about Apple's decision to refuse to protect their employees from viewpoint discrimination because, well, they're totalitarians. 6:35, Will Estrada. He's the senior counsel with the homeschoolers. We'll give you an update on the war against homeschooling. 7:05, Joe DeGenova on everything. 7:35, Hung Kao running for Senate in Virginia. 8:05, John Solomon, just the news on the Biden administration's manipulation of vaccine safety data. And then at 8:35, our very own buddy Vince Colonnese, who you just heard from John Matthews. He interviewed Donald Trump late last night that will be running on the program this afternoon. We'll give you a little preview.
Great lineup.
We'll give you a preview of that as well, that interview, so you can see what Trump had to say to WMAL Nation. That's all coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Julie Gunlock. Happy Monday to you.
Happy Monday.
Your weekend was good. You're
It was
happy?
great. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was busy for me, zipping down to Charleston. That's why I wasn't here Friday, for if anyone was wondering. And then back up from Charleston, South Carolina is a terrific city.
No kidding. Well,
It really
good. I'm
is.
glad you're back, but it's
Not
always
a-
good to get away.
Not a bad meal to be had
Ugh.
in the entire town. And we tested it. All right, Nikki Haley yesterday won the District of Columbia primary, which sort of tracks, right? I mean, that
Nothing surprising.
there is no surprise there. If you had to bet, if you had to put money, say, all right, after the primary process,
Write-ins would have won.
Nikki Haley is going to win one primary. What would it be? I mean, obviously the District of Columbia.
That's right.
By the way, people were noting the analytics of the breakdown of the vote and everything.
Oh,
in
they
the
spent a
DC
lot of time on
Oh,
this.
yeah. The coverage on this was phenomenal.
Our analysis was like, duh.
Yeah, duh. Well, there are two actually important takeaways about this. First of all, if you actually look at the votes, do you know how many votes she got?
I didn't look.
So it's the District of Columbia. It's the 7th biggest media market in the country. It's one of the largest cities and keeps growing in the country. They want to be a state, you know. I keep
Yes.
hearing that the people of the District of Columbia would like to be a state. So they just had their primary. How many votes did Nikki Haley get to win the Republican nod for the nomination? 1,200.
Wow.
Yep. I think more DC residents go to a Gonzaga football game
That actually is true.
than voted for Nikki Haley yesterday in the primary. It's and
Well, people have,
It's 1,200
look,
votes for
people have
Nikki.
errands on the weekends,
Yeah,
right?
that's it. No, there's just not a lot of Republicans in this town. 676 voted for Trump and 38 voted for Ron DeSantis. As was noted on social media, I didn't know National Review had 38 staffers living in D.C. The diehards are still there. Charles Cook is like, out of my cold dead hand, will you take my Ron DeSantis bumper sticker? Nikki Haley won it, and it cuts two ways. So that's the first way. It's a real insight into how few Republicans live in Washington,
Right,
D.C.
which is why Republicans should not commit crimes or be accused of committing a crime in the city.
That is actually, you stole my
Yes.
second takeaway. Because when you look at this, out of D.C. in the primary, there were only 1,900 total votes cast, which, again, I still believe is below a football turnout for Gonzaga High School.
Yeah.
So, number one, that's how many Republicans are here. And even they hate Trump.
Right.
Because on a factor of 2-1, they went for Nikki Haley over Donald Trump. And that, my friends, is your jury pool.
That's right.
That's the jury pool for all of the charges that Jack Smith is bringing against Donald Trump.
The jury pool is also mostly Democrats. You'll be lucky if you get one of these Gonzaga football playing attendees.
And if you do, odds are they hate Trump and voted for Nikki Haley.
Right.
That's my point. The jury pool is overwhelming. And that's a pretty important takeaway, I think. It's that. So Donald Trump's statement that he put out on Truth Social is, it's kind of perfect, actually. If I could, if you don't mind, since it's a big day for Donald Trump here on WMAL, since he'll be out with Vince Gallaudet this afternoon, and we're going to read his statement right now. This is what Donald Trump said in conceding the D.C. primary. Tonight's results in Washington, D.C. reaffirm the object of President Trump's campaign. He will drain the swamp and put America first. When Nikki has been soundly rejected throughout the rest of America, she was just crowned Queen of the Swamp by the lobbyists and D.C. insiders that want to protect the failed status quo. The swamp has claimed their queen. President Trump will fight for every American who was being let down by these very D.C. insiders and devastated by Joe Biden's failures. Caroline Leavitt, Trump campaign press secretary. It's kind of savage. Queen of the swamp.
Yeah. And I mean, for conservatives, for Republicans, D.C. is nothing but a swamp. And so to claim victory here, not a good look.
So what do you say to the I saw it. I follow on social media about a lot of young people who are staffers on Capitol Hill. They work in media or they work in the communications. These are contexts that we have professionally. And also the journalists, I sort of act as a not as a mentor, but I'm there for advice since they're, 15 years.
Well, I work with a lot of young
you
women.
do too, of course, at
Yes.
Independent Women's Forum.
Mm-hmm.
And I did see a lot of them, young Republican women saying this is so historic.
I know.
This is groundbreaking.
Yeah.
The first woman to win a Republican primary.
Yeah, that's my
in
reaction.
history.
But look, we have to remember many of these young women grew up in the world of Oprah and a lot of my feelings, my truth. And yes, they might be conservative. I find this true of a lot of young women where I'm sort of, head desking, listening to them prattle on about their truth and living their full life. And, it is a cultural phenomenon that's going to take generations to go away. But this is how Nikki Haley talks.
Right.
Don't forget.
Right.
Nikki Haley's always doing this whole, she tries to do a Thatcher kind of thing, but it falls flat. And
So-
she uses these bromides.
I'm torn on this, though. If you look at, I saw an amazing poll the other day that broke down Republican and Democrat voters based on marital status. Married men, overwhelmingly Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Married women, not as overwhelming, but pretty overwhelmingly Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Single men, it's close, but they still lean Republican. The one demographic that is beyond overwhelming, just a freaking landslide, just like insurmountable, is single women who vote Democrat. And I think it's important when you've got a Republican single woman who is excited about Nikki Haley. I know your response is shut up, but we got to
I know we're on time.
I want you
here.
to answer. We'll carry this over because I'm torn. I want to be able to get that. If you're excited, I'm excited.
You shouldn't talk to him in that way, but I'll tell you why.
All right.
We should be honest with women.
Julie Gunlock is going to bring the wisdom here. This is the mother-in-law that every young woman who is excited about Nikki Haley fears. Julie Gunlock, who will tell her tell it like it is.
Nightmares.
And by the way, I could be describing your daughter right now, who may be,
How do you reach her? How do you talk to her?
How do you reach her? Because we need as a party to figure that out. All right, we're going to get to that in a sec, but first it's 5:15.
WMAL, making sense of the forecast. Because you never know what Mother Nature has in store. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
So I'm asking about this phenomenon. We saw Nikki Haley win the Republican primary yesterday in the District of Columbia, which literally is meaningless, except it inspires a conversation because I saw a lot of young women who I know personally, and I don't know if they were old enough to vote for Trump. They may have been old enough to vote for Trump in 2020. I'm not sure, but I would consider them good, solid Republican young women in their 20s who expressed excitement over Nikki Haley winning the primary yesterday. They may have even participated in the primary process, either for her campaign or just as a voter. And there's no doubt Republicans need to harness and grow young single women because they're getting devastated right now by them. And I want to reiterate, these are politically active young women. How do we reach them and how do we communicate with them? It's like, you're excited about Nikki Haley, great. Let's turn that excitement into actual sort of.
We need to remind women that there are policies out there that are well intended, but make their lives miserable. Okay. And think about AB 5 out in California, which the Biden administration is currently trying to nationalize. And that rule is going to go into effect in just a couple of weeks, which means contractors will be fired from who contracts with them.
Yeah.
And you think about how women want more flexibility. They want more control over their lives. And some women believe the path to that is through government. But we've proven over and over again that is not the path to freedom, that we actually need more economic freedom. And many of these candidates, well, certainly the candidates on the left, don't offer that. So we need to explain to women that really the Republican Party is a much better path to having control over your own life. As far as Nikki Haley goes, I do think culturally women tend to like this kind of language she uses sometimes when she says, I wear high heels, and she's, again, tries to use these sort of, I call them Oprah terms. And I do think that attracts, but ultimately people need to look at her policies. And when you compare Trump and Nikki Haley, to me, there's no comparison. But I do think that she is attracted to them because she knows how to talk to women.
Yeah.
It's not the way you talk to me, but there are plenty of young women who kind of like this sort of girly talk, which she engages in.
Yeah, and Trump engages in the opposite of it.
Yeah.
And I think that,
but again, that's why I think you need to look at policies.
Yeah.
You need to look at what Trump did to secure the border, to make foreign relations better, to improve the economy, to cut taxes. He was winning over women. Right. He was. And during the Trump administration, unemployment among women was at a historic low.
I hear you. That's very cerebral and logical. But a vote is not always that. A vote is sometimes emotional. And
right.
Frankly, and I'm sorry for stereotyping, but for young single women, I think it's more emotional.
I agree.
Or not, and I think that it's a challenge that
our
Republicans
society
have
also
here.
tells women, go to work, build a career, don't build a family, ignore the instincts you have to build a home and take care of a family. And I think to some degree, then they get on this sort of wheel. And then they're going to support people who support that lifestyle.
But Nikki Haley actually represents the opposite. Nikki Haley is to these young women, I think Nikki Haley is, I had my career and I'm a wife and I love my husband and I have my children, and that inspires them.
Yeah, but
so
she doesn't.
Don't we want to how do we keep them in the fold?
I don't think she talks that way. I think she talks in the language of the left. She talks about having brown skin. She talks about how powerful she is as a woman, despite having to work in a man's field. I even have her cadence.
I know, you're really good.
I was really impressed with myself. But she doesn't talk as if, look, I had a lot of choices and I've made these choices and this is how I live my life and women really deserve the truth. She talks like a liberal. And there are plenty of women out there who feel more comfortable with a liberal sounding Republican rather than Donald Trump, who's a little brash.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. She has said something, Nikki Haley has, that sort of does remind you of a liberal because she's gone back on her word. She has now made a statement that she is no longer bound by the Republican National Committee's pledge that you support the nominee, whoever it is.
What is going on?
So she's paving the way to either go third party or to just be a never Trump spoiler of sorts. She could maybe even endorse Joe Biden if that's the path that she chooses.
Look,
but she has announced now that she will not support Donald Trump if he's the nominee.
I don't mean to suggest that she's doing this entirely for, for her own career.
Selfish reasons.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a lot of money in the Never Trump path.
Yeah.
Book deals, Vogue spreads, CNN contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand the stubbornness here. It makes me wonder again about her personal motives.
Yeah. It's 5:23. Just to sort of button this up, as they say here, Julie. One of the more maddening things about the Nikki Haley question, and I think if I can summarize your position here, I think you're saying the best thing to do to build the Republican base is to get those young women married to a good conservative man, because they'll be more likely.
No. I think that we encourage women to get married, period.
Yeah.
And have children and start on a life where they're going to care more about their communities, their public schools. They'll care about the things that are affecting them, their ability to be a good parent, a present parent. Marriage does that to you. You suddenly care about the schools when you have kids.
You lay it out that way, and I would say to these young women, well, great that you're inspired by Nikki Haley. How about be inspired by Kellyanne Conway, who look at the career she had. She elected Donald Trump as the first woman as a campaign manager, and she is certainly not on Team Nikki.
Right.
That's kind of, and then of course she had a crumb of a husband that screwed her life up.
Yeah, but I do think that these constant attempts to attract these young women, I don't know that I think it's a Sisyphean kind of challenge, because these women are in some ways unreachable. But if we encourage women, again, to get married, to have families, then we have a fighting chance at winning those women, more of those women over.
If you can win John Fetterman over, you can win anyone over. And coming up, we'll tell you John Fetterman's latest heroic stance on Israel. What's with this guy?
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Hey, y'all. 5:37. It's O'Connor and Company as we continue to unpack the historic triumphant victory of Nikki Haley yesterday. A huge game changer, not just in presidential politics this year, but American politics writ large. They're making room on Mount Rushmore. I'm just trying to fit in with all my friends in the mainstream media who are on this, right? Actually, even MSNBC, I think, last night was like, this is literally meaningless.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Coming up at 6:05, Ethan Peck, National Center for Public Policy Research. 6:35, Will Estrada, the Homeschooling Legal Defense Association. 7:05, Joe DeGenova. Boy, we got everything for Joe today, including a potential decision handed down. Could be as early as today on that Trump Colorado ballot question. 7:35, Hung Kao is running for U.S. Senate in Virginia. 8:05 is John Solomon. And then at 8:35, Vince Colonnese is going to be giving us a little bit of sneak peek to his exclusive interview with Donald Trump. It'll run during Afternoon Drive today during, not coincidentally, the Vince Colonnese show. But we'll talk to Vince about what the presumptive nominee for the Republicans had to say. He said, well, tomorrow's Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
Sort of kind of snuck up on us, didn't it?
It did.
Because it's sort of been baked in the cake, I think, here. Yeah. Right? But we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow on Super Tuesday. We'll hear what Donald Trump had to say to Vince Colonnese about all that stuff and more. All right, so John Fetterman, seriously, what's the deal? John Fetterman, once again.
Love that guy.
He had a bunch of pro-Hamas protesters knocking on his door, his Senate office door. He came out in his hoodie, waving a little Israeli flag. Just to sort of...
He's so funny.
First of all, senators never come out and respond to any of these people, nor should they. You don't want to feed the beast anyway. And not only did he come out to engage with them, but he brought his little Israeli flag with him. And then when they started shouting back at him, he just shut the door in their face.
I have to say, the brain healing of John Fetterman has been one of the most interesting things to watch. But I have to say, as he has become, I hate to say this, but I mean, as he has become a little bit more conservative, right, in his takes, and I don't mean, that's sad that I have to say that, but really it is mostly conservatives that are very supportive of Israel.
Yes.
It's been interesting to see how quiet his wife has become, Giselle Fetterman, who was just the toast of the town when Fetterman couldn't talk. And was clearly struggling with both depression and his brain injury. Mm-hmm. But as he has healed and has been very reasonable, and again, it's not just Israel. He said some very reasonable things about the border.
On the border, yeah.
And he has said other very reasonable things about, hey, can we all just have a conversation? Can we all calm down? He seems very sort of reasonable about things. But I do find it interesting that there's less press interest in both him and her.
John, especially her. Yeah. You're right about that. John Fetterman is more conservative and more consistent on border security and support for Israel than Mitt Romney. The nominee for president 8 years ago for the Republican Party.
He comes out and waving his little Israeli flags or talking about the border. He's fearless.
By the way, amongst the protesters in front of his, I want more details on this, and I haven't been able to get it, but it's someone who in uniform identified herself as an intelligence officer in the United States military. Since when can you go engage in a protest of any kind, let alone on Capitol Hill, knocking on the door of a sitting senator in uniform, and engage in a protest like that?
Yeah, that should be investigated.
100%.
Will it? No.
And are we shocked to learn it's an intelligence officer?
Right.
Thanks. So John Fetterman then, after this scene, takes to the X social media platform and says, this is direct from Fetterman on X, demand Hamas to surrender, demand release every hostage, demand to seize billions of dollars Hamas stole from Gaza, demand those stolen billions to rebuild Gaza and compensate true victims, Israelis and Palestinians, demand Hamas eliminated or permanently exiled. Now, this is a man who just suffered a stroke, and he is more clear and more stalwart and definitive on long-term traditional American policy with regard to Israel and terrorists in the Middle East than Joe Biden has been in his entire presidency, let alone the last 20 years of his presidency, or the 20 years of his political career. And
Fetterman also, I want to be clear here, he's been consistent.
Yep.
There's been no...
it's not like he wet his finger and put it up in the air to see which way the wind is blowing.
And you think about when you mentioned Romney, you'd think Romney, there'd be all these qualifying statements. There'd be like, of course, we have to consider that there are all those kinds of hedging.
Right.
Not with Fetterman. He is just...
That's right. There are way too many Republicans who are also, we do support a two-state solution, we do think that, and Israel needs to, dial it back a bit and all that stuff. So... Jason Willick, who I am unfamiliar with, but he is a columnist at the Washington Post, so I'm immediately suspicious. Mm-hmm. But he points out something really interesting here. As of now, in Pennsylvania, Quinnipiac has Fetterman on a +3 advantage in terms of favorability to unfavorability. So the majority of Pennsylvanians are in favor of John Fetterman and the positions that he's had. Biden is underwater by 18 points. And the mainstream media narrative right now is that Biden is being
his
harmed.
So-called support for Israel.
His support for Israel is hurting him.
Yeah,
right?
Which is barely there.
Look at the votes in Michigan. The undecided came out against Joe Biden, and it was all meant to be. It's the pro-Hamas wing, and you've got voices in the media, and you've got voices in the White House who are whispering in Joe Biden's ear, saying your support for Israel
is hurting
you with your base, and you've got to fix that. And there's literally no evidence to show that.
Because the Democrats are desperate to find anything else besides the real reason, which is that Biden and the Democrats have abandoned working class Americans. Yeah. That is the reason. Not Israel, not these other issues. It is because working class Americans are saying, you know what? Trump seems to be my guy.
I have no doubt that in New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, D.C., Chicago, especially on the college campuses in those towns, yes, Biden has lost support from young Democrats because they're pro-Hamas. But in a state like Pennsylvania?
Yeah,
we're full of those working class
and Michigan
voters, and in Michigan, that's
auto workers.
What's hurting him is exactly he's not going to have a problem in Michigan right now because of Dearborn and the pro-Hamas voters. It's the UAW workers.
Yes,
100%. And it's very interesting.
But the Democrats don't want to admit that.
Fetterman, as long as Fetterman keeps doing this, though, it is a perfect thing to point to and show you not only exactly why Biden is having certain issues there with voters, but also to show you what the media is trying to do here to push him against Israel.
If Republicans are smart, they will understand the dynamic that is going on here and realize that those issues that Democrats used to really be the leaders on, we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity. Persuadable Democrats are willing to vote for Republicans because we are the champions of issues that used to be only sort of championed by the Democrats.
I'm reading between the lines here, Julie Gunlock, and what I'm hearing is Trump Fetterman 24.
It could happen.
No, it couldn't. Stop it.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Of course it could happen.
It's 5:45. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the fives with Jamie Whitten and the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center. Julie Gunlock, I've never asked you this question, and I feel I need to ask you this. Were you a sorority girl?
No. No.
I could see you as a sorority girl.
Sure,
little
but
Kappa
no.
Gamma situation. Little Alpha Phi. Tri-Delt, perhaps. No?
Nope, I did not. I did not pledge.
My entire experience with a fraternity is my brother. My older brother was a Sigma Chi. They're rather arrogant, those guys. You know, John Wayne was a Sigma Chi. It's like, that's all right. Congratulations. But I think everybody sort of likes the idea of the fraternity sorority world, the Greek culture, as they say on college campuses. Best exemplified, of course, by the documentary film Animal House. Let's face it, there's a lot of partying and a lot of that stuff that goes on. Well, apparently, despite years and years and years of desperate attempts to sort of calm down the binge drinking and hazing culture in these Greek institutions, it continues. And sadly, in some cases, it continues unabated. And it's reached the point now at the University of Maryland where they have now immediately yesterday suspended all fraternities and sororities pending multiple reports of unsafe activities in College Park.
And they say that as activities, they don't specifically describe it as hazing, but they say activities that have threatened the safety and well-being of members of the university community.
Yeah. Listen, there was a death in Virginia of a Virginia Commonwealth University student down in Richmond for a hazing incident. And because of that, there was a big anti-hazing legislation that was put through. I'm always hesitant when I see these stories. I know this happens. I know there's been terrible stories about binge drinking and people going through all of this, horrible stuff that the upper class would make them do. And it's all in good fun. And it's what my dad did and my dad's dad did and all that stuff. I'm saying dads because it's mostly a guy thing.
Although sororities have gotten pretty bad.
But then, but I always want to take a step back and hit the pause button because I remember very vividly when we heard about the University of Virginia fraternity gang rape situation that Rolling Stone reported on.
False.
And it was a complete false
fabrication.
Story. It was totally fabricated. And I think that they target fraternities and sororities because they represent traditionally sort of this elite, sort of snobby, exclusive, white kind of thing.
Well, I'm uncomfortable that the suspension will take place indefinitely while an investigation takes place. And while that investigation is going on, they are barred from contact with any new prospective members. So obviously there cannot be new pledges. And they're barred from hosting any events where alcohol is present, according to the letter. And look, I understand they've got to get this under control. But that is the punishment before a crime has even been adjudicated. And that to me seems unfair.
Well,
and
this is-
universities tend to do this.
Yes, it's one of those out of an abundance of caution to protect people. We're
Yeah.
going to do this. But yes, suspending basic rights.
Yes.
of
Well, they're
course.
going to, I mean, that'll, if you can't bring in new pledges, you're going to kill the fraternity. So,
But I'll also say this, and I'm sorry for being on all sides
course.
of this
Yeah, I
issue,
know.
but sadly, the University of Maryland didn't give us a lot of data to work with
Right,
here.
right.
My other college experience that I'm very directly connected with, of course, is at the Naval Academy, where they don't have fraternities or sororities because it's like one big fraternity sorority. And real fast, historically, famously, the hazing of the plebes is a tradition there. And I can tell you the military has been trying really hard to stop the hazing. They're like, you can't put plebes through this. You can't make them do all these things. And I have seen it like just in the last 5 years of my experience there. And I keep talking to plebes and hearing what they're going through. And I say, I thought you weren't allowed to do that. I thought they weren't allowed to do that to you. And they go, yeah, they're not allowed to do that. But it still happens. And that's in the military. It still happens. So this sort of thing, as long as there are fraternities, it's going to happen.
yeah, it is going to happen. And honestly, I was in college many years ago, but that's part of the reason I did not pledge or was not interested at all. I didn't even get close to it, was because of that culture of partying and drinking and sex. And I went into college and I was, I was a practicing Catholic, and I wanted to stay away from that lifestyle on campus and really focus. I know I sound like a nerd, but I really want to focus on academics. And frankly, I think that as a culture, we have gotten away with seeing college as a place you go for learning. It is a place increasingly where you go to get in debt and to party.
Yeah.
And until that changes, until the entire higher education, I mean, this is such a big.
Why can't it be both and?
Oh,
Come on.
I'm not saying that you have to, go to mass every night, and but I do think that we've gotten so far away from going to university to get an education.
Yeah.
That this is why this is a bigger problem. That it is just baked in the cake now that you go to college to party.
Which, by the way, brings us back to, you're basically validating my joke that Animal House was kind of a documentary on this whole thing. So the more important question is, which of the 70s, 80s fraternity movies was the best? You got Animal House and you got Revenge of the Nerds.
I didn't see them.
You haven't seen
No,
any?
I know.
Are
I
you
know.
serious?
I'm like,
What is wrong with
I know.
you?
I'm sorry. I'm usually pretty good on pop culture, but I didn't see those.
All right, well, let's take it to social media. If you would like to vote, I'll set it up there on the Larry O'Connor X account. The best trashy, party movie of all time featuring fraternities in the 80s, Animal House or Revenge of the Nerds.
Wasn't there something also like Meatballs or something?
That was a camp.
Oh,
that was
okay.
That was a summer camp.
I remember all these R-rated movies I was not